Hey everyone, before we start the episode, I just wanted to thank you guys for making the first episode of this series a complete success. Um, we had a great time. If you haven't seen the reveal on Deladey's channel, here's a little sneak of what you missed. As we started, I was gonna say every time Deladey says beautiful, take a shot as like a little drinking game.
Oh.
Like don't do that, don't do that.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. It's beautiful, beautiful, Mike. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Everyone,
Somebody's gonna go to the
do
hospital.
that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Garden Rescue. This is episode 2, and we are in Geekism's Nuna Kanata, which is a really awesome take on the traditional zoo that we've been seeing in the game. This is a little bit more true to the taiga region of, I think, Canada. There's definitely a lot of Inuit references and stuff like that. Beautiful little zoo that he started. It's very new. You can see that it was just started. And so this is the area that he wants me to work on. This is going to be a grizzly bear habitat here in the foreground. But the thing that I'm going to be working on is this cliff face. Which is supposed to look like this. So this is the reference picture, and you can see that very steep faces going straight into the water, a big wide river, not super deep. You can see that it's a really slow flowing river, that you can see the bottom, a bunch of wildlife on the side, water plants and stuff like that, some evergreens here, a little bit of birch here, and just really it's all about the rocks and making sure that formation looks good. I also included this one, which is the Gates of the Mountains in Montana. It's on the way to Helena, our state capital. And this is really awesome because I actually took a tour in this area, and you get to take a boat through the Gates of the Mountain, and it's just this big steep canyon with big sections of rock that are just jutting out. So I wanted to take this idea and kind of abstract it down. You can see that how the plants are hugging the rocks, and just the way that the rocks are all forming into the river because that's the direction that they're going. So off the bat, I see a few concerns. The rock. So you're only going to get so far with the terrain tools, since we only have 8 swatches, and some of them are snow, which is not super helpful for blending and stuff like that. It's super helpful for zoo management, but it's not super helpful for what we're doing. So we have to blend things together. We have to blend some stones, some flat stones together to create rock walls. And we have to do it in such a way that the texture doesn't repeat or become super noticeable. Second problem is that the river is there's no place for any of the sediment to deposit, so there's no bank or anything like that. That absolutely needs to be fixed. Also, the river is way deep. Woo! Very deep. So I think we need to turn that back into a shallow river. I like his little rapids here. I think that's very effective. And I think overall the height needs to be a lot taller too, because that particular cliff face, because we're not designing a cliff face that is in a flat park or something like that, it's not artificial. This is meant to look like nature. And so we need to be at the scale of nature, which is much larger than this. And I think overall this whole thing needs to be pushed back because it's sitting really close, and you're not really getting the sense of scale that you're getting in this picture, where if I'm standing on the banks of the river, I can see out, and I can imagine how big those mountains actually are, those cliffs are. So we got our work cut out for us. Now, this is not going to be, a traditional type garden. This is going to be a garden rescue in which we emulate the processes of nature, and that's going to be that's going to be a new challenge. Alright, so here we are. In the first update, you can see I pushed the cliff face way back. I've shrunk the river down a little bit, although it still needs to be made shallow. But it at least has now a bank so that we can have some trees and stuff like that to help soften the rock, which is really going to help. You can see I've started cobbling some stone together here. But what I wanted to go over in this segment is a bit of a geology lesson, because if you're going to emulate what nature is doing, you kind of have to understand the processes behind it. So this is my lovely flatland. This is before any sort of geological activity has happened. The ground is pretty much settled. But underneath, just waiting underneath, is this rock formation here. This giant piece of rock that will become my cliff. And that is just sitting way, way low beneath the crust. And all it needs is some sort of force to bring it up to the top. Well, here we are. Here is Mr. Force. And that can be in the way of tectonic plates underneath pushing up. It could be a hotspot of magma or lava. Any sort of force that's going to push this rock up. That's what this is emulating. So what's going to happen is in a singular geologic event, that rock is going to get pushed up to the top. But that event simply doesn't just bring the rock to the surface, it pushes all the land on top as well. So all that sediment that was flat is now a hill, or is now up further than where it was. And so that is the process of uplifting. It is pushing a massive fold of rock up, sometimes thousands of feet to the surface, but the ground around it is still encasing the rock, and so you still need another form of erosion to actually show the cliff face. And that's where the magic of water comes from, because the water is an incredible erosive material, and it's just going to push, and it's just going to keep pushing that sediment down off the face so that more and more of the rock is visible. So you can see a cliff is starting to form. And then if you have a consistent level of water, then you get a really powerful erosive force, which is going to be a river. This river is going to do a lot of the job of taking away all that sediment and leaving that rock, because that rock isn't a fine aggregate. It is all linked together due to compression forces underground. Sand then gets deposited in some of the smaller soil particles and stuff like that. Boulders get stuck in the middle of the river while sand moves to the side. And so the river does all of the excavation work, and revealing the rock that was buried thousands and thousands of feet below the surface before the geologic event uplifted it to the top. And as sediment is brought down the river and deposited next to the cliffs, trees start to form, because the cliffs now act as a natural wind barrier, which allows smaller seedlings to take root and become larger trees, which then, in turn, allow other seedlings to take root and become larger trees. You have grasses that then stabilize the banks, and that is the theory behind the geologic process of the source material that Geekism is trying to emulate. So the question is, how do we do that in Planet Zoo? Well, this is how I've figured out how to kind of do it. It's not going to be as smooth as the rock in the source material, but if you can play with scale and you can make big rock chunks that look a little bit more natural, like you can see I have these cracks in here, and the way that that's formed is literally just a single type of stone rotated and changed and just made into a bit of a natural shape here. So this is going to be the edge that is actually outside, that is causing the cliff. And the easiest way that I've found to kind of make natural looking cliffs is to do this. So you just rotate it a little bit, drop it a little bit, rotate it a little bit. And that way your angle is very similar, and so it looks like the rock is all folding in the same direction. But this alone is not going to get you to where you need to be, because you need to have the terrain work itself, and so you need to figure out how to blend both the terrain and the additional rocks. And we're going to use the stamp, because this is an awesome feature, and I really wish we had this in the other game, because this has made it so much easier. You're going to form terrain stamps right next to your flat pieces. And that gets the ball rolling at least. Then from there, we can sculpt. And then here's a tool that I use that is probably the least used tool in terrain, and for whatever reason it really shouldn't be. It's called Chisel. Chisel is incredibly easy to work with. It's really easy to control. You don't end up getting like booba rocks or penis rocks with it. You can create very flat faces, and you just kind of work the terrain so that your cliff face is actually showing, but nothing else is. Okay, that's looking pretty promising. It still requires a lot of work to get it where it's going, but to really accentuate the forested look, because this is a very wet kind of area that Geekism is building in, I want to take some of this grass short, and I'm just going to, on the protected side of the rock, I'm going to add a little bit of green moss using the grass. And so there you are. That's just a little bit of a crash course on how I'm trying to achieve this rock face right here. In addition, you want to have something, I usually use, I think it's Rock 7 or I forget exactly. Yeah, Tundra Rock 7 has really good vertical pieces if you're doing large scale things with this kind of crackly texture. In general, you just want to make sure that you are covering up the repeating pattern so that it doesn't look like a blob of rock. I think I'm pretty much done with the rock now. I've used the same techniques, and you can kind of see over here, it's a little bit flatter in sections. Now, I'm not super worried about that because I know that trees are going to be able to cover up some of that, and some of the shadows work pretty well. It would take a long time if this was just a rock face itself. I could probably get it to look a little bit more realistic, but I don't, because it's going to be covered up by trees, I don't necessarily want to focus my time on that. Here's something that I think might be useful for you guys, because if you're trying to create really realistic shorelines or something that you want to control a little bit better, water is a pain in the ass. Because water restricts what you can actually control on the shore. Just the way that they did the water this time. So if you just put in some sort of shiny roof piece there and put it to the water line, then you can adjust your shoreline however you want. Take it out when you're happy with it. Take that. Put the water back in. And whoop, I think I went a little too high. There we go. And there you go. Now you know what your coastline's going to look like. And you don't have to keep going back and forth. Remove the water, change the thing. Remove the water, change the thing. You can see it right there in real time. Alright, so that's the hard part done. Now I get to do the fun part, which is all the plantings. For the top, I'm going to be using very, very, very restricted kind of palette. I'm going to include some ponderosas, mostly Doug fir, because that's a lot of what you see out in his source material, and then a little bit of Scots pine just to change up the skyline of the forest and give it a little bit more roundness. At the baseline, we're definitely doing a lot of birch. Birch is something that you see. Really, it would possibly be aspen, but you know my thoughts on the aspen in this game already. It's frustrating that they decided to make everything in fall colors. Aspen in the fall are incredible, but my zoos are not always in the fall. So, anyway. But birch has the same kind of white bark and the same, a very similar leaf texture. Plus it's a little bit smaller, and I think I can use it for other things too. So if I sink it into the ground, I can actually get something that looks a little bit like chokecherry, which is another native tree shrub that grows here. In addition, reeds, they just remind me of grasses. I don't know why they're called reeds in this game. but it doesn't matter. It looks good. Definitely some bulrush reeds, which I more associate with reeds. Definitely some elephant grass. And I don't use the stand like a tropical. I bring it way, way down so that it looks like it's just popping up out of the sand. And that's how you get a little bit more control over this grass. Because otherwise, I mean, it would be way too tall. The grasses don't get this big here. At least not right on the waterline. It's not a tropical. This might be nice to have, just a little bit of a shade-loving wildflower. And I'm quite taken with these alpines. I think they are done a little clumsily, but I think if we kind of shrink them into the grass a little bit, they look more like blue wildflowers that you would see out here. And then I think this is going to be super important too, because in my source material there is a lot of green cover and not a whole lot of like just this grass sitting here, but more like this ground cover where it kind of clumps up and takes over large sections. And here we are. You can see that it is looking a lot more complete now. That's because it is complete. At least for now, that is the end of this garden rescue. I just wanted to go over a few of the things that I did here. On the waterline, I really wanted to layer in some of those bulrush, not just near the cliff, but also over here, just if a start happened to make its way down. Definitely a lot of grasses around in a really loose, kind of naturalistic style. You can see how the trees have actually softened the lines of the rock quite a bit. It certainly helps to blend some of the techniques and stuff like that, because it just doesn't show off all of the imperfections so much. That's where plants and trees come in handy. You wonder why I'm so interested in it in this game. It's because it hides a multitude of sins. Over here, I wanted the forest to kind of rejoin with the top so that the cliff kind of separates it, but as you get further and further, the forest comes back together. Yeah, I think that looks really good together. The bulrush I've mixed in with a whole bunch of things just to kind of get it to look a little bit more natural, because in nature you have a lot of these things growing together. You'll have a big stand of reeds, but then you also have some grasses that want to take over, and then you also have some of these other greener grasses. Sometimes you have something like this in there, which gives a little bit more of a foamy look to it. Then you have a lot of this arrowwood that is, as it takes hold, it just starts moving its way across the entire landscape. You can see the alpine holly does not look nearly as bad. It just adds little pops of blue here and there. And I thought blue was pretty safe. You can pretty much have that any time of year. Normally, wildflowers are in the spring, but if you have a good rain year, you can have wildflowers up through the summer too. Yeah, I think that's going to make a really nice grizzly bear backdrop, I would say. I love this little detail. When I worked in Geekism's Planet Coaster Park, Pinewood Hills, I added a bunch of these ADA ramps and stuff like that so that you could get wheelchairs on there, so that if you end up having stairs and you don't have ramps, you can put these in. And he was able to do it much better here. I mean, his looks so much better than mine did. Oh, that's awesome. So that's where I think I'll leave it today. I mean, it wasn't a huge garden that I'm working with. It was more a garden of natural concepts. Hopefully you learned something, and hopefully you can take some of these ideas and use them in your own zoos. If you liked what you saw today, you know what to do. And I hope to see you in the next episode of Garden Rescue. I'm not sure exactly who it's going to be next, but if you have a zoo or a garden or an area, a problem area that you'd like to submit, I am definitely I'm open to suggestions. Let's just say that. So until next time, I'll see you later, guys. Bye.